What is going on, you guys? I'm back with another video, and today what I want to talk to you about is why it's so important to make the uncomfortable decisions in the now, because it will lead to you having the things you want later down the line. Now, just a quick backstory. I was just scrolling through some of my Instagram content. If you guys do want to check my page out, it is the exact same as my YouTube. It's J Stroud Fit. But I was scrolling through and I saw one of my videos that I remember posting because I was in a time where I had kind of fallen off a little bit with the habit of keeping up with my training. And the reason for that was I was putting my clients and working on my business, I was putting so much effort into that I ultimately got a little bit burned out and wasn't getting proper sleep, adequate nutrition, and these sorts of things. And so during that time, I ran into a little bit of joint pain, and it was frustrating because part of me, I knew what to do. I knew the ways to fix it, but I didn't want to have to put the effort in because it was just so frustrating. And I didn't want to have to take the time and do the mobility exercises and do the stretches because honestly, my body was hurting and I just wanted time to take care of it. And the thing is, time will never take care of these things. And so, to make a long story short, I created the Instagram reel that I posted it, and a caption said, "First it's May 1st, then it's June 1st. Next thing you know, summer's over." And what I meant by that post was, first thing you know, you put something off, and the next thing you know, so much time has passed, and you're in a worse off position because we are compounding in a negative way, right? Like we're actually getting worse and we're losing this progress that we've maintained for so long. And on top of that, we're not building and making new progress. Now, during this time, I was very frustrated because I wanted to get out of the hole I was in. And I knew that the only way to do that was to humble myself and just know hey, I can't continue coming into the gym and lifting heavy weights and doing the exercises I want to do. I have to, prioritize these things. So ultimately, that is what I ended up doing. And just coming off that video now, or coming across seeing that, was interesting to me because not only was it a physical thing where I wanted to get my physique back into the shape I wanted to, just be moving better. But I also wanted to have my routine back in terms of I wanted to have my energy levels optimized. I wanted to, feel in my best state, which is, where I'm feeling now. Not to say I'm feeling perfect, but I'm in such a better position. I'm able to exercise, I'm able to train, I'm able to focus on building my business, but doing so without having to make these things sacrifices, right? And so I think it's extremely important to know that it's never going to feel easy during those times. There will be times where it's easy, but only when things get better, right? So when things are in a tough spot in your life, there's going to be days where you feel motivated, but there's going to be those dark times where you don't feel like continuing to go. And it's really in those times where you continue to surpass and push through that on the other side of the tunnel, you look back upon and you're glad you did. And that's one of the moments I just had, right? I just basically came across that video and thought to myself, wow, I remember being in that position, March, April, even getting into May, where I wasn't doing all that I could to excel myself to that next step that I wanted to, and to get back into the shape that I wanted to be in, right? And we all hold these standards for ourselves, and I had this standard for myself, but at the time, I really was, facing, do I want this bad enough? Or do I want to just maintain the progress I have and let these things kind of clear out? Because ultimately at that time, I wanted to really work on building my business and helping more clients. And so I knew that I could take some time away from the gym because I've been so consistent for so many years and it wasn't going to affect me. But what I found during that time is that's where I lost so much of my peace, my joy. That's where, I felt so much stress. And it's funny because the whole reason that I got into fitness in the first place was to help me mitigate those problems, right? And work through and become stronger and ultimately help others. And now where I'm in the past in a position just a few months back, maybe 6 months ago or less, where I'm teaching these things to my clients, but I'm not implementing as much as I could. Although I'm still, working out a few times a week. I'm still, aiming to eat decent foods. Like, I really wasn't prioritizing my sleep and these sorts of things because I just had so much on my mind and so many things that I was working on, so many projects that I wanted to build up. But what I had to come to the conclusion of is that it's good to give yourself the space that you need to, regather your thoughts. But at the end of the day, you need to get back on the wagon and continue trucking forward. And, you eventually just get back into the mindset and the framework of, okay, this is what I need to do, and I'm going to have tunnel vision on these goals. And I didn't think about the difficulty of getting back into the routine. Like, thinking back on it now, there were times, of course, where I didn't feel like working out, but it always was easier. And there was never once in my head that thought of like, oh, I should just back out now. There were just times of like, oh, I don't feel my best, like, but you push through every time, and you just endure more of this pain, and you create discipline in the act of that. And so coming across that video was super cool because I'm like, hey, like, I really went through May, June, July, August, September, and now into October, with a lot of things going on, but ultimately getting back into the place I wanted to be, right? Like, prioritizing my health and my fitness, and that has allowed all these other areas of my life to improve. Like my relationships, my career, all of these things improve as I put my fitness first, and that's only become more and more true over the past few months. So you need to realize that there will be a time where it feels very friction-ish. That's not even a word, but there will be times where there's a lot of friction and you don't feel like doing the tasks. And it's in those times that you endure and you continue to go that you look back upon them in weeks or months' time and you realize, like, I'm so much ahead of where I was then, and I can't believe, I even questioned my ability to follow through on that task, right? And it makes you appreciate and become grateful for where you are and where in your journey you've ascended to because of the previous steps you've taken. Looking back on your previous self and saying, like, I'm glad that individual, took the right action steps to get me in this position. Because a lot of times I think we look back and we think like, oh, I made the wrong decisions here and there, which is of course good to reflect, but at the same time, it's good to reflect upon the things that have worked and the things that are currently working, do more of those. And also, be glad that you took those steps, like, be glad that you took risks on yourself, be glad that you went all in on your goals, that you put your health first, these sorts of things. And I just want to wrap up the video by saying that there's always going to be a time where you feel like putting things off, right? And in that time, when I was in that, March, April, whatever, I forget when exactly, that it was, the post was in May, and it was about a month or so of me getting back into the routine, and it was like kind of starting to stick as these easy habits to follow again, whereas before it was a little bit, more uncomfortable than needed, right? Like, where I'm at in my journey now is I genuinely enjoy this and I find so much passion in it, and it becomes easier because it's such a habit I've been doing for so long consistently and tied to a good emotion of me feeling good, right? Now, during that time, it was almost, I don't want to say the opposite, but it was hard to get back to that fully. Just again, because I had all these things going on amidst the injuries and the things, on my plate. And so what I've noticed now, looking back on that time, is that there was never a time where it became easier, but gradually it got easier. There was never a time where one day I finally was like, oh, I'm finally back in the groove of things, or like, oh, this was finally a good workout again. You have your good workouts in here and there and whatnot, but it was never like one day where I'm like, I finally feel like I'm back where I should be. I finally feel, back in the routine. There's never that feeling. You just continue trucking, you continue pushing forward. And then you look back and you realize, wow, the past couple of months, I've been really good with these habits, and I like haven't stressed over them, right? And you do that more and more, and one, it increases your confidence in yourself. That you've taken action, and two, because you're doing them so often, you're improving on these skills and you're getting better with them, and it just gets easier to manage things. Literally 2-3 weeks of practicing a consistent habit, it's almost entirely, just inside of your brain. Like, you're not going to think twice about doing that thing, right? Like, it's a no-brainer, right? But there's always that initial phase where, it feels tough. And then even throughout that journey, it feels tough, but you'll just notice gradually it getting easier and you finding more enjoyment in it, especially if you have that perspective, that outlook of, doing it for that best reason of like why you're doing the things you're doing. Eventually you get to a point where you just look back and you'll be like, yeah, I'm glad that, I did all those things and I took those actions and I made those decisions that were ultimately hard and difficult, but paid off. Right. And now I remember growing up when I was 13, 14, 15, 16, like 17, all these years. I remember every summer it was always, say, like January or February, and I said, I'm getting a six-pack abs by the end of the summer, or by the beginning of the summer, so that I can be at the beach with a six-pack. And now, like, I had abs at that time because I'd been working out and playing sports, doing a lot of cardio and eating right when I was, say, like 13, 14, upwards of those years. And I had abs, don't get me wrong, but I always knew that there was one more step I could take. I always knew that if I really committed to, dialing in my nutrition and my training and, these sorts of things over the long haul, that I could really like get to a point where I looked insane. And again, that's, everybody can do that, right? Anybody can get to that point where they are extremely proud of their self and how they look, and they're like, wow, that's a good feeling. Like, I can't believe, I've accomplished this. And I always found that, say, I'm 100% is where I could be at if I really grinded and I really stayed consistent with all the right actions over the long term. I felt like for a while I was around the 85 to 90% mark where, I was putting a lot of the effort, but then here and there I would slip up. And I think over the long haul, I was pretty consistent. And then at certain periods, I would turn that consistency, that intensity up, right? And so maybe it would be January, February, and I'd be like, okay, now I'm going to start consistently doing an ab workout every day. I'm going to start doing some cardio. I'm going to start cutting back on some of the crappier foods I'm eating. And that would last a week or 2 weeks. And, eventually I started to realize after so much time that like year after year after year after year would go by, and it would be, May, and I would still not be where I wanted to be physically. And after I wasn't, like when I was at that point, I would, maybe take some more action steps. I would get a little bit closer, and then I would maybe finally get to that look I wanted, but then I wouldn't keep up with those actions. And then just a couple weeks later, I would still have, maybe I'd still be in good shape, but like my abs were not popping as they were just a couple weeks ago. Why? Because I decided to, go with friends and eat ice cream, or I decided to, cut back on the ab training and the cardio and the strength training and these sorts of things. But what I noticed was that it was always difficult to do over the long haul. And now there was never a time during that period where it became easier. And year after year after year passed, even to the point where some years, and as a matter of fact, most of those years, it would be June, July, even sometimes August. And I'm thinking to myself, or even end of August, I'm thinking to myself, I just need another week to really lock in, dial in on my goals. And then I'll go to the beach, say next week, and I'll look shredded, right? And I'll post like an Instagram picture or something like that. It was all this stupid stuff. But it was even for the picture. It was more so, like I felt like there was always more I could unlock, and there was always a little bit more that I could improve upon. And I would always be, upset at myself that I didn't get that point. And then so I would go into grind mode. And ultimately I learned that it's good to have a balance across these things so that you can do it sustainable. But also it's good to see it from the flip side, and that like there is so much more that you are capable of. But what I'm getting at with this story is that during each and every one of those times, there was always that difficult period. And I always kept putting it off. It was January, and I said, I'm going to start in February. And it wasn't like I'm just choosing now, but it's saying I'm not taking action today and tomorrow and the next day. And next thing you know, a month passes, right? And so it would be January. And then be like, okay, I'll start in February. I still have, whatever, 3-4 months. And then February would come. Okay, now it's March. And then it's like, okay, now March is coming, like let me really get locked in, and then April, May, etc. And it's like, okay, bro, it's halfway through the summertime and you still don't have the look you want. Why is that? It's because you're not taking the daily actions. You're not doing the necessary steps consistently enough. You're doing them sometimes, and when you're doing them like over the top, like way more than necessary, which is awesome, and you're doing all the right steps, or at least most of them, which compiled will give you that guaranteed success. But ultimately you are not doing it consistently enough. And so I think if you want to achieve what it is you want to achieve, then you need to know that one or two things. One, you need consistency. You need to be doing this over the long term. Two, you need to be doing the right things and really being hyper focused on the now, the micro, the today. And if you pair the two, that's when you're really in the sweet spot, because now you've been doing all these right actions and you've been doing it over the long haul. So finding a way to be able to do both, meshing them together. Now you have the progress you want, but also you're sustaining it over the long haul. And so that Instagram video that I came across made me understand that, wow, like I really, just went through those times, because it was never easy. Just like, almost a decade ago when I got, or over a decade ago when I got into fitness and I was 13, 14, 15, 16, trying to get six-pack abs, and I was putting it off, thinking it was going to be easier in another couple of weeks, another month. It was never easier, but those times where I just got into the habit and stuck with it, during even those times way back, even though it might have only been a week or 2 weeks that I was, consistent with all those tasks, I realized that like I felt so much better during those times. And, the confidence you have of feeling and looking that way, because you're making the current sacrifices day over day, that ultimately makes you feel way better about yourself and makes you not want to, give into these other unhealthy habits, right? And so coming across that video just reminded me that like, hey, it's always going to be challenging. And as a matter of fact, as I was driving earlier today, literally no word of a lie, I was driving and I had this thought that, I don't think I'll ever get to a point where I'm content with my physique and how I feel about my fitness. And it's funny because I've had clients ask me that before on calls, and I'm like, hey, it ultimately depends. I think our brain is conceptualized to always look for improvements. And so if you have that sort of mind, I think that's awesome, because I think that when you get to a specific area, you're not being ungrateful for what you have. You're being grateful, but most importantly, now you can see things through a different lens, right? Like, for example, I'm not calling anybody out here, I'm just literally posting an example. If you are 50 pounds overweight, meaning like this is the weight you want to be at, and you're 50 pounds above that, in that position, you should not be like worrying so much about like when your abs are coming, for example, right? Like, and when you're going to be able to see your visible abs, right? Like, that's something to look forward to, and you should maybe think that through, but you should be aligning your thoughts, your actions, your intentions, and your focus with what you can control today. So, okay, like, have that vision in the back of your mind, but don't get upset at yourself or frustrated that you don't have the six-pack abs. It doesn't happen overnight. You don't just go from 50 pounds overweight to six-pack abs overnight. But if you can execute the proper steps day over day, then in 50 or 60 days time, it is genuinely possible. You could be down 50 pounds on the scale in just a couple of months. But you cannot overpsych yourself and stress yourself out by thinking too far ahead and only looking at the result, right? Meaning we're oftentimes looking from where we are now, we're looking into the future and where we want to be, and then we're getting mad that we don't have that result now. It takes time. Practice day over day what you can control today, and you'll notice that you get all of these things done, so that in 50, 60 days time, even when it still feels hard, it still feels difficult to keep up with, you have that goal. But the nice thing is when you get there, you realize it wasn't as difficult as you might have thought before. And you will be so glad that just a couple of months ago, you took the action steps to lock in on your fitness, on your goals, or whatever the goal is. You will be so glad that you took the decision, the action, because there's never going to be a time where it feels easy to get started working or get started with your workout. Now, you can do things to make it easier on yourself, but ultimately, just doing it over and over. It doesn't matter how it feels when you do it, doing these tasks that you need to be doing. Eventually, you get to a point whereby you have the result you intended and you were going after, but you also realize that you've developed so many skills and so many habits, so many character traits along the way, which drives back to my previous point about, do we ever achieve the results we want? It's truly at that point when you realize, wow, I'm in great shape, but I don't want to stop here. I've just understood, I've come to the awareness of what I've actually been able to accomplish, and what, applying the skills the God-given skills and also my talents, the things I've worked for and towards. And I've applied them with a strategy to actually, achieve this goal. I wonder what I could do if I did this for longer, over the long term. And I wonder if I could add in better habits and maybe even be more efficient with this process. So to answer that question, I don't know if there's ever a point where you get to an end goal and you want to maintain that. Now, some people, yes, they want to maintain their current look, and that's fine. But I think that with anything in life, you always want to be aiming above for more. And so back to, my point about me driving, I had this thought, like, I don't think I'll ever be at a point where I feel, I'm perfect, and I'm, of course, nobody's perfect, but I don't think I'll ever be at a point where I feel content with, like, okay, this is the look that, like, I feel good with, sort of thing. Like, yeah, of course, I'm proud of the physique I've built, but I always know that, okay, I built up these muscles, now these ones need a little bit more detail, sort of thing, right? And now, because you're giving more attention to the detail and you're seeing visual, tangible improvements, your clear lenses, right, will show you more problems, and you go find solutions to those problems. And that's not a bad thing by any means, right? But because of that, you're constantly understanding the simple fact that it doesn't feel easy. You're always trying to figure out new problems. You're always trying to find new solutions to these answers, or new solutions to these problems and issues. And it doesn't feel good in the time being, but ultimately, looking back on it, once you've tried a bunch of things, once you've had successes and results, you notice that you were glad that you took all those action steps, you took, those previous actions, and you just literally you took the first step, and then step 2, 3, 4, etc. And never on any of those steps did it ever feel as though it was easy and it was the right move, and you had a lot of friction there, a lot of limiting beliefs or things holding you back, but you still pushed through. And you know what that does? That builds up self-confidence, that breaks down your lack of self-belief. And so you're literally ripping down that self-belief, like, yo, I didn't feel like doing this on any of those days, but I still did it, and I'm the man because of that. And that in your subconscious tells you that, like, I'm capable of so much more than I can only imagine. And I think that is why people get to a point where they're like, hey, I achieved my goal, but I still want to keep pushing. I still want to keep going. Because, look at what I just accomplished. Imagine if I could accomplish even more. And I believe I can now because I have the mindset. I hope you guys took something from this video. Ultimately, just know that there will never be a time where it feels easy. There will never be a time where it feels like now is the good move. And you might have those brief instances, but they'll fly by. Literally, bro, every move that I've had times, where I think, oh, this is the perfect move to take. And then once I'm actually in the act of taking that action and making that move, it feels like, oh no, like I don't know, sort of thing. So there's always that friction there. That's normal. But go through that and work towards bettering yourself every day. And you'll look back in 30, 50, 60, 80 days time that you were a completely different individual. I appreciate you guys watching. If you want, again, to check out my fitness content, IG, which is Instagram for you guys living under a rock, it's JStravaFit, same as here. Stay tuned for more content like this.